So today we're doing the hymn-based reflections. So I was thinking about, obviously, the hymns that Kimberly chose for us today. She had her own logic for doing so, and we do not share what that logic is, so that when she is here to hear it, that will be as surprising to her as her choices were to me. I like the serendipity that's available there. I found particular inspiration in the first hymn today. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? Well, that's theology. My very favorite thing. Better yet, it's a theology that I would argue with. Though only in the details in a more or less sympathetic way. But it might be that through my argument with the lyrics, that I find in the end we agree mostly, primarily, the song and I. What I like is that it identifies and hails in its endless song an unconditioned reality, a state of being not beholden to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, but also still alive and inspiring. Now, I understand the constraints of rhyme and meter that are placed on lyrics means you can't always say everything that you intend to say in a lyric. My argument then is not with the metaphors of the hymn, but with the ontology that it suggests. Ontology is thoughts about being, existence. And this song locates the unconditioned space, that endless song. It locates it out there, far off even. That is its map of being. And it is that with which I will argue. It's a quibble, perhaps, though one I think that is worth having. You see, I also hear this endless song. Or if I'm being honest, maybe it's more that I yearn to hear it. But it seems impossible to me to think of it, the endless song, as other and removed at a distance. Now, pause for a moment to remember that we are in the metaphorical realm with lyrics. We always actually are in the metaphorical, I suppose. We are just more intentionally so with poetry. But this endless song, it is simply a more lovely and particular way of saying God. They snuck one in on you Unitarians. Now, God, we might observe, is a much abused metaphorical shorthand for the resonant harmonic of interbeing that is both universal and cosmic in scale and deeply personal in sensation. God is a metaphor. And as a vocabulary and as a being, an abstraction. I mean, for those who consider yourself an atheist, which I do, depending on the room. If I'm in a room full of theists, I'm an atheist. and vice versa. I feel like that's a Unitarian Universalist duty to be contrarian. Anyway, for those of you who consider yourself atheists, I hope you're picking up what I'm laying down. I don't think God is something to believe in. It's certainly not contained in or even particularly accurately described by those who would translate the translated translations of any one or a few of the holy texts. So please do not get hung up. It's a thing both the Jews and the Taoists know well. The God that can be named is no God. God is hard to hold. And so the writer of the hymn locates God, the endless song, as out there and far off. And this makes some sense, for how can an endless song, an unconditioned being, unbeholden to the endless adjustments of the interdependency of all existence, be here, be part of the push and pull of tumult of life? How can you be unconditioned and be subject to this? But in contention with the song, we also know through the witnesses of saints and sages and witches, and maybe through personal experience, that this unconditioned state, a state beyond metaphor, howsoever metaphorically understood, exists within us. And I would say that given the interdependent nature of nature, and more to the point, what I see as the interbeing of all phenomena, that is, this unconditioned state exists, at least in potential, in all phenomenon, in all plants, in all animals, all earth, all atmosphere, all people, all relationships and events. And this distinction between understanding God as out there, far off, calling us, as differentiated from one that is within and all around us, well, it seems to me that that difference has consequences. And I'll get to the consequences in a moment. I do appreciate that the echo of this state of being, of the echo of God, of the song, sounds in the writer's soul. The echo connects the soul to the endless song, reproduces it, as it were. Better yet, it compels the writer to sing. Remembering that we are in the intentionally metaphorical, we can understand that singing in the song indicates more broadly action. It is an action. It is not mere sentiment. I am compelled to act because my soul echoes the soul of God. That seems right. It even seems like a kind of litmus test, though I could easily see how litmus tests can be abused and made oppressive. Nonetheless, the song, or at least your minister, seems to be claiming that when one's soul is in tune, is filled up with the echo of God, you will, as a matter of course, plunge into action. How can you keep from singing? Sentiment alone will not make tyrants tremble. And love is betrayed by those who hold on to it, who soak it up without wringing themselves out. Love is nothing if not in action. Only a dead God stops at the sentimental. I can tell you that I am more often full of dead gods than inspired ones. It's true, and I'm not sure why, though I have a suspicion. And it's the very consequence of the lyrics I mentioned earlier and the basis of my quibble with the lyrics concerning the ramifications of understanding the ground of all being, the endless song, God as out there rather than right here. When God, that which is most fundamental about us, including but by no means limited to biology, is seen as out there, we are, again, as a matter of course, separated from that which is most fundamental. In that case, God is only ever possible as an echo. And if the most fundamental is removed and other than us, then most certainly everything less fundamental, everything derivative thereof, all of our actions, for instance, everything also unimbued with the endless song is all the more other. And this is actually the world that we live in. We live in the world of other. We live in a world where God is removed and far away, and we are cut off from that experience and subsequently from each other, from our planet. I put it to you that either of these understandings, or really any of their cousins, are indeed self-fulfilling prophecies. They are stories that shape us, that compel us. Our stories make our choices for us and define the limits of the metaphors by which we understand and engage our lives. Stories make us who we are, and this story is one of separation. And it is the dominant story under which we live. What good is love if it is out there and far off? When God is other, everyone we see is other. Our planet is other. Our breath is other. And in a world of other, the self reigns like a scared, small-handed tyrant, reactively tweeting itself into a narcissistic hall of mirrors that only ends in pain for you and others. Because while it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, God as other is also not accurate. So not only do we labor under the story of other, we suffer the indignity of being wrong about it. For we are not other. The unconditioned, endless song of the cosmos is who we are. Which means not just who you are, but who the person next to you is. Who the person in the car you'll wait next to at the red light on the way home is. Who the cop is. Who the criminal is. Who the guy that shot U.S. Marshal Chase White is. I spent most of the day on Friday with the spirit of Chase White. You may know he was shot and killed last week while serving a warrant to a guy who was stalking a female officer. Chase was a former lieutenant colonel in the Air Force and a U.S. Marshal. And more than that, the son of my colleague, Reverend Linda White. Reverend White currently serves our congregation in Chase's hometown of Peoria, Illinois, and has attended this church and some of our functions when she would visit her son in Tucson over the last few years. So I want to tell you just a little bit about this memorial because it is relevant. So because Chase was in the Air Force and the U.S. Marshals, the service was held at the convention center, and there were about 4,000 or 5,000 people there. Most of them were in uniform of some kind, There were, of course, the Air Force and their blues, and then there was every branch of every kind of law enforcement there in their dress uniforms. Everything from, there was Las Vegas police there. There was Maricopa sheriffs, there was Pima sheriffs, there were, Peoria PD, of course, Tucson, Pima, Border Patrol, all in uniform. All armed, by the way. A lot of guns. And I can tell you something that surprised me, although I'm embarrassed to say it. There was more diversity in that room than there is in this room. A lot more. And I am awfully hard on our law enforcement people, but what I saw there humanized them for me, diversified them for me, made them not monolithic, made them people. Now, as diverse as it was also fraught with masculinity. All sexes were fraught with masculinity in that room. That may not be entirely fair, but go with me for a moment. And at one point, a drill sergeant-looking fella comes out. He's got the Smokey the Bear hat and a double chin with the strap that cuts him here, so he's got a triple chin. And he said, "All uniformed personnel, 10 hut." And they all snapped to. Thousands of people there for Chase. All this because a guy with a gun to grind cut down a good man. An amazing man, really. I didn't know him. I came to know him through the service, and I know his mom. He left a family, 4 kids, and a wife, without a daddy and without a husband. The man who shot him left Chase's friends with only memories and left a goodness-sized hole in a messed-up world. Chase's friends were also mostly in law enforcement, trained in the way of enforcing order. You can imagine how they felt about this man who shot their friend and colleague. They were not likely above the tumult and the strife. So at the memorial service, his friends and family have spoken, and after they were all through, Chase's mom, the Reverend Linda White, was invited to the podium. The woman who formed the goodness of this good man, his sense of duty, determination, service, and sacrifice. "He was my heart," she said. She thanks everyone who was there, this huge new family that she didn't know she had, all the cops and military and border patrol and city, county, state, and federal law officers. And she assures them that she believes that Chase's squad, his brothers in the U.S. Marshals on that night, the squad, the 8 guys that he was on duty with, did everything right that night. She also assures them that she believes in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, which is why she tells them that it was good to bring in her son's murderer alive. Because she believes that that man has worth beyond his own understanding and experience, and that he has been failed at so many turns by so many people, his course was all but inevitable. She's telling this to 2,000 or so armed officers and their spouses, all of whom themselves see themselves in Chase and in those closest to him, people with a clearly martial view of justice who are angry and broken with grief. And this woman, the reverend, the mother who lost her boy, sees into the unconditioned reality, trapped inside and oppressed inside and intoxicated by the story that shaped the man that killed her son. She hears the endless song, and in spite of and maybe because of her unbearable grief, she sings it. And how could she not? Having heard it, how could she not sing it? And by her singing, we hear the echo of the endless in our own souls. And I pray those officers heard it in theirs. Can you believe that? Holding that truth in that moment, in that room. Do you hear that endless song in her lips? The inherent worth of all people, the unconditioned connection and indwelling of all beings, the man who killed her son. Do you feel that echo in your heart? Can you keep from singing, though? Will you take one more step? Or will you cease at sympathy? Only a dead God stops at the sentimental, and sentiment will not make tyrants tremble. Hearing the echo of Linda's words in your soul, hearing her song, can you keep from acting? It's not a rhetorical question. Can you take one more step? Can you? Good. There's work to do. I have work for you. I have need of a room, several rooms. There's no room at the inn, a phrase so luminous at this time of year, but it's not a metaphor now. Not now. I'm actually asking you for a room. Maybe there's room in your home. You see, there's a number of people who are fleeing impossible violence in their homelands and making their way toward ours. What happens when they get here, they're put in jail. They're put in custody. And they could be there for sometimes days, sometimes years. But it's a jail, and they walk around with chains on their feet, fleeing death squads in collusion with the police in their home countries, risking their lives to come here. They get here, they're put in jail, and they need sponsors, and when they get sponsored to get out, so they get sponsored, they get out of jail or custody, and then they have to go back and report for their hearing. But in between those times, they have to have a place to stay. And they are not released until they get a place to stay. So there are people in jail simply because they don't have a place here to stay. Now, the rooms that we need are for a couple of days, sometimes maybe a week or two. They're for people who are in relationship with organizations that we're in relationship with. They are not strangers. They need a room. These are people who don't even necessarily understand Spanish, by the way. These are many of them indigenous peoples. They need a room for a couple of days. The unconditioned reality, that being that infuses and transcends contingency, that space unaffected by the tumult from which all being emerges and all being houses, that space that binds us as one and calls us into witness and action, that ultimate energy that emerges as different eyes, that fiery forge of love that sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? How can I keep from acting? But what shall I do? I shall give the minister my name in an email and let him know that I have a room. And even if I don't have a room, I will do something. I will take one more step. Please rise as one to take one more step, hymn number 168.